All right. My name is Sarah Levesque, and with me today I have Phil Lollar.
Howdy.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure, I'm an old man. I am one of the creators of Adventures in Odyssey. That's one of the things that I've done. Actually, just so funny that you're asking me this because just two nights ago, I was out in California recording more Adventures in Odyssey episodes, and um, Katie Lee, who plays Connie on the program,
Hmm.
also has a podcast called Tell You Later. And she said, "Oh, let's do a podcast while we're here." And so they came to my hotel room and we set up and did like 2.5 hours worth of talking about this stuff. And she wanted to talk about, let's talk about all the stuff we've done together. And I kind of forget it as it happens. I do stuff and then I kind of forget. And she's like, "Remember that thing?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, remember that thing and that thing and that thing." And it ends up being like dozens and dozens of things that we've done together. Um, but the short answer is I was one of the creators of Adventures in Odyssey. I'm also a professor and teacher of writing um, at Azusa Pacific University, and I've taught in the past at California State, Los Angeles, um, writing, specifically dramatic writing, script writing, directing, all of those things. I've been doing that for the better part of 40 years now. And so that's basically me in a nutshell. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but I do writing, I do acting, I do directing, I do all of those kinds of things. That's been my life.
That's awesome. So, when did you start writing?
I actually have written pretty much from the beginning. Ever since I was very young, I found I really enjoyed the process of writing, even in school, writing stories and things like that. Um, but I started out as an actor. I really liked acting more than anything else. And um, so I got involved in a lot of local productions as I was growing up as a teenager. And I did a lot of musicals, I did a lot of dramatic plays. And actually, after I graduated from high school, there were people who were telling me, you really need to go out to Los Angeles. You need to go out to Hollywood. There's nobody who looks like you. You have a unique look. So you really should go out there. So my wife and I moved out there. And there used to be a paper called Dramalog, and it actually has all of the casting that's going on in town, around town, and whatnot, for movies, for television, for radio, for theater projects. And I would see in Dramalog a description of the character they wanted, and it was me. It was me, this tall, this hair coloring, skin, all that sort of stuff. It was me, and I'm like, okay, I got this. I go there, and I go to the audition, and there are 50 other guys who look just like me, and all of them are connected. I have no connections with anybody, so I never got anything. And so I thought, well, maybe I should turn to putting the words in the mouths of the actors instead of actually doing the acting. I still like acting. I still enjoy it, but maybe I should try that. And so I went back to my writing. Um, I did stuff on my own, just like everybody else when they start out. I did stuff on my own that I didn't expect anybody to ever see. I started journal writing is what I started doing more than anything else, just because I wanted to learn how to play with words and see how I could make words work in the right way. And then slowly over the years went to school in different places and started submitting projects and started writing and submitting articles to magazines. They used to have these things called magazines, and they were actually, you could physically hold them. They were printed on this thing called paper, and and uh, and so when I first started out, I wrote a couple of articles. One magazine was actually a short story magazine. It was all fiction, and then the other magazine that I submitted to, I did this on the same day. Finished two articles. The other magazine was to an industry magazine called Box Office Magazine, and it was about some film services stuff that I had been associated with and doing. And I waited just like everybody else waits.
Mhm.
Back then, you were really waiting because it was all snail mail. There was no email,
Right.
and so I was waiting for a reply. And then you get them. Somebody sends you a letter, and in this instance, it was the literary magazine that had sent me the letter, and I opened it up, and it was a very small paragraph. teeny weeny paragraph, and on it read, and I quote, "You will never be a writer. Break all your pencils. You will never be a writer."
That's
That's basically what it said.
harsh.
Break all of your pencils. You will never be a writer. And
Oof.
so naturally, I was crushed, as anybody would be who gets a letter like that. And so I went about my daily chores and whatnot. And the next day, I got a letter from Box Office Magazine, and they said, "We love your article. We want to buy it. Congratulations, you just made a sale." So you never can tell. You never can tell what you want, what's gonna happen, how it's gonna work. You have to stick with it. You have to keep on doing it, keep on keeping on. And if you love it enough, hopefully something will happen.
There you go. So, what was your first book that you wrote?
First book that I wrote was, I think the first big book that I wrote was the Complete Guide to Adventures in Odyssey. In fact, I think I have it right here. I have a copy of it. It was a big complete guide to, it's the old guide to Adventures in Odyssey. Complete guide. If you have one of these, it's an antique. So that's really nice. But that was basically, let me see if I can put this back without upending everything on my desk. There we go. It's basically all about Adventures in Odyssey, the history of the show, how it got started, the episodes. There's a categorization of episodes. It goes by year up to, I think, 1992 or something like that, 93, something like that, which of course is not even half of the series at this point.
Right.
But I did little blurbs and questions and about the episodes, and then talk just about the history year by year of how it got started and how it progressed and what happened each year to make it work and grow. And so that was the first big book I wrote, and then I've written a lot of other smaller books ever since then, leading up to the things I'm doing now, which is basically the Young Wit series and the Blackguard book series. So
All right. Well, we'll get there in a minute.
okay.
But so at the point when you wrote that book, how many years had you been writing? You were writing the episodes for Odyssey, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes. We'd been writing. So I think if that book came out in 93 or something around in there,
Mhm.
Odyssey started on the air in 87, at the end of 87. And I worked on creating it all that previous year. So 86 and all the way through 87. And actually premiered as family portraits on the Focus on the Family broadcast before it was ever Adventures in Odyssey. So there was a small 13-week mini series of episodes that were kind of test episodes to see if people actually wanted this kind of thing. We didn't know anything about it, if they would accept a weekly radio show or not. And everybody, the prevailing wisdom was no, nobody's going to tune into a weekly radio drama show. Nobody cares. It's got to be daily. Like, we can't do a daily show. That would kill us. We'd die to do one with the quality that we wanted to do. It would have to be kind of a soap opera. We just didn't want to do that. So it was a big gamble. It was a very big risk, but we put those 13 episodes out on the Focus on the Family broadcast, and then got a lot of feedback from listeners, and they really liked it, and said, "Okay, please do this." And we narrowed the scope of it, and we refined it, and we, argued about it, and everything else that you do in the creation of a show. And then it premiered in 87. Um, um, so from January all the way through to November of 87 is when the program was in development. And then this was at least another from the winter of 87 or November in 87 to 93. That's where that book came about, was in, I think it's in 92 or 93, somewhere around in there. So we had 4 or 5 years of development, 5 or 6 years of development, and then
How
that
many
book came about.
how many writers did Odyssey start with?
Me, and then Steve Harris wrote some episodes as well, and then Paul McCusker came on board, and then it was myself and Paul for multiple years, just the two of us.
Yeah.
We'd get every once in a while somebody who would come in and do a one-off,
Okay.
but for the most part, it was just the two of us for a very long time. We tried to get people to come in, but a lot of the people that we were looking at didn't know how to write for the radio. They knew about screenwriting, and they knew about books and screenwriting and anything else, because radio drama, we were reinventing it. Nobody wrote for the radio, nobody wrote drama for the radio. And so we were really kind of reinventing that art and that art form. And so it was very difficult. It's kind of, everybody thinks, oh, if you could write one thing, you could write another thing. And that may be true to a certain extent, but there's a real special, every discipline has its unique things. You have to write a screenplay differently than you write a teleplay. You have to write a teleplay differently than you're going to write a radio and an audio drama. You have to write those differently than you write podcasts. You have to write all of those differently than you write books. All of them have their own unique ways of working and functioning and whatnot. And so if you can do all of those things, you're in pretty good shape, I think.
Awesome. So tell us about what you're currently working on. You mentioned the Young Wit series, and I thought you mentioned something else, but I'm not sure.
Yes. Okay. Well, currently what we're working on, I just finished book 5 in the first Young Wit series. It was a 5-part series, and it basically tells the story of John Avery Whitaker when he was young, when he first started out. We're starting right from the beginning with him. It goes into his history and how he became wit, all the wit that everybody knows and loves. It just talks about his childhood, and it's a lot of fun because I had a lot of this stuff in the back of my head for years and years and years, and wanted to do it for a long time. And then we finally got to go ahead to do it. All of that stuff is kind of pouring out, and then I'm writing them with Dave Arnold, who's the executive producer of Adventures in Odyssey. And both of us are, again, we're going back and forth with the stuff and making sure that everything is right. But it's been a lot of fun plotting them out and developing those early aspects of Wit's character, of young Wit, and who he is and how it works, and his relationship with his parents and his relationship with the people around the small town that he grew up in. He grew up in a small town. Similar to Odyssey. It was called Providence, North Carolina, and it's just been a whole lot of fun to go through. There's an overall story arc for the 5 books, and then each book has their own individual story arcs as well. So they're all complete. You can start at any time, at any place in the story. You could start, and it would still be okay. You'd be fine, but you really kind of do want to start at the beginning, because that's, as a certain musical puts it, that's a very good place to start. So the other book series is called the Blackguard book series. Now, if anybody who's familiar with the audio program, the radio show, understands who Regis Blackguard was, Dr. Regis Blackguard was. He's the bad guy, villainous guy, was trying to do lots of very nefarious things around Odyssey. And basically, these are novelizations of his story arc on the show. So basically, I'm going back and going through all of the stories that Regis Blackguard was involved in, and now novelizing those and adding other things that we couldn't do on the air. So there's other stories going on in the middle of all this. What happened historically was, in the middle of the Blackguard series, in the middle of everything that was happening, about 5 years into the show, Hal Smith died. He was our first Wit. And because we had to replace him, or we had to do something to keep things going. So the books happened. The books are all Wit, and suddenly Wit's gone. And now we have other people, who are taking their place until Wit would come back. What we did from a story perspective on the show was have Wit go out of town on a missions trip, and he's basically doing archaeological digs and missions work in other countries. So for me, on the books, I have to create that. So, because I really have a great story arc for that, but that wasn't something that was playing out on the audio program. And so that's been fun too, to actually see how things, the familiar things that were happening that everybody knows about on Odyssey, those things were going on, and everybody knows that. But now also here's some stuff that they had no idea was going on. And as it so happens, the stuff that happens in some of the things that happened in the Young Wit book series set up things that are happening in that part of the Blackguard books. So the two series are actually interwoven. They're connected with each other. So it's this big epic thing that everybody has the patience. We hope everybody goes, oh, that's the reason all that happened. So this, of course, is it gives me a chance to go back and fill in all the plot holes that we had in in the early versions of those stories.
Uh-huh. So is it difficult for you switching back and forth between the two series?
No, not particularly between the two series. Um, it's it's not really that difficult. I really know kind of what I pretty much know what I want to do with the books
Mhm.
as far as how those are going to play out. Both the Young Wit books and the Blackford books. So it's not really that difficult to figure out exactly where I want to go with this and how I want to write it and how it's all being plotted out. But I take a long time to do this, way longer than I should, and way longer than I've been contracted to. So that's a bad part of of having an artistic temperament. It's like this is a business, but at the same time, you're the art part of the business, and you're like, well, I don't care about your deadlines. You know, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing.
Right.
So, um, but it's taken me longer. But at any rate, like I said, the Young Wit books, which are longer than the Blackford books, but they're all finished now, and I have two more Blackford books to do, and now I'm on top of them, and hopefully all of them, everything will be released next year
Okay.
in completion next year. The first three Young Wit books are out now. You can get books 1 through 3, and the first 5 Blackford books are out now. So 6 is written. Blackford 6 is written. 7 and 8 I need to finish. And the first 3 Young Wit books, 4 is written. 5 is now complete. We're doing some refining on 5, just doing some rewriting on some things. But that should be out. It should all be done and out next year.
Nice. So how many books are going to be in each series? Do you know?
So there are 5 in the first Young Wit series,
Hmm.
5 books, and then there are 8 Blackford books. And
Okay.
I'm hoping I can get everything stuffed into 8 books of the Blackford series. I still have a lot to do on the Blackford series, so and only 2 books to do it in. And those are shorter. Those are like only 20,000 words or so. Um,
Okay.
so that's going to be a big challenge to be able to get all that done in 20,000 words.
Yeah. Because you write for younger readers, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, I write actually, I write, it's targeted at younger readers, but I don't really write for younger readers. Same thing as the audio program. Everybody says, oh, it's a kid show. Well, yes and no. I mean, it is targeted at a certain age group, but it's really for everybody. It's for the whole family. The concepts that we talk about and the things that we do on the show itself are not just for young kids. From the beginning of Odyssey, I said right from the beginning, we should take what I call the Warner Brothers cartoon approach to Adventures in Odyssey. And if you go back over the old classic Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner cartoons, you'll see that they had something in there for all ages. When you're
Okay.
really
Yeah.
young, you like the characters and the slapstick humor and the colorful, scenery and all of that sort of stuff. You get a little older, you start getting more of the jokes.
Hmm.
You become a teenager. There's something there for teenagers. When you're a young adult and even an older adult, you can watch them and still get something out of them in the watching all the time. So they really were for all ages, even though they were cartoons, which are ostensibly for young kids. Same thing for us. I really wanted to say, okay, maybe our target audience may be 9 to 12,
Hmm.
about junior high age, maybe a little before that, but it's for everybody. There's something in there for everybody. And the reasoning was, if kids like this, they're going to listen to it over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And who are they going to be listening to it with? They're listening to it in the car, they're listening to it in the house, and they see it over and over and over again. Well, their parents are going to be the ones who are also listening to it over and over and over
Hmm.
again. And as a parent, I realized, oh, you know what? Let's make something for the parents too. Let's make something
Right.
for everybody. You might as well be entertaining and have some value in it for everyone. And so again, it's very much like all the major newspapers in the United States are written at a junior high level, reading level.
Hmm.
So anybody from junior high upward can read a newspaper. Same thing here with Odyssey. We're targeted at a junior high audience, but it's for everybody. Everybody has something in it,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the way the books are too. The books are targeted at a certain age reading wise,
Hmm.
but the themes in them and some of the stuff that happens in them is a little bit, it's the same kind of stuff that happens on the program, but when you're reading it and kind of use your imagination, which is what, of course, book reading does
Right.
into the world. And then you have to start thinking, ooh, wow, this is really spooky or dangerous or exciting or joyful or whatever it is that you're trying to get across.
Right. Yeah. But I kind of noticed that, not a huge amount because I haven't done too much recently, but uh before the whole pandemic thing, I was babysitting a kid
Hmm.
very regularly. And when we were in the car, I would put on my old adventures in Odyssey that I still had on CD.
Yeah.
And she was enjoying them, and I was enjoying them again. It
Yeah.
was great.
There's what frequently I'll hear from people who will say, "Oh, I never caught that the first time.
Mhm.
When I heard it, I never caught it." And I listened to this over and over when I was a kid, and now I'm an adult, and I'm only just getting. Oh my goodness, you did that? Did you mean to do that? That's the other thing that happens. Did you mean to do that? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did mean to do that. It's really lovely to put Easter eggs and references and little things in the episodes that kind of do go over your head when you're younger, but then you
Right.
come back and listen to it later and you go, oh, this had so much more meaning than I even realized at that point. Or it's just, oh, that's a fun reference, that's so cool, did you really mean to do this and this? Yeah, I meant to do it all. It's not an accident, it's all there.
Okay. So, why do you write? Like, what is it that makes you put pen to paper,
Put
that
pen to paper. um, well, I could give you the answer that's in Shadowlands. We write to know that we're not alone.
is.
Or is that we read to know that we're not alone? I don't remember which one that was. It was in the
They're
C.S. Lewis
both
book,
true.
but they're both true. Um, I don't think it's anything that lofty. I think it's I really enjoy story.
Mhm.
I enjoy stories. Telling stories is very important to me. And as a matter of fact, in my own work as a professor, as a teacher of writing, I teach basically that story is everything. It's all we have. It's all we are. From the moment God said, "Let there be light," and creation happened, a story started, and the story is ongoing. And it
Yeah.
has ebbs and flows and ups and downs, but you can't stop the story. The story continues on. And because story is all we are and what we are, it's really important for us to understand what story is, how it works, why stories are put together, why stories from our lives are actually told in story form. This, I think, if people would understand this a little bit more, would help them when they're facing times of trial and tribulation and trouble. Um, a lot of young people need to understand, I think, teenagers and even younger need to understand that what they're going through right now is just a chapter. It's not the whole book. And um, and if you think about great events in history, whether they're from biblical history or whether they're from secular history, or literature, if you think about great stories, how great stories are developed in literature, you see that the hero, the protagonist, is usually has their back up against the wall many, many times. No place to go. They hit rock bottom, and you would think if you left it there, that would be it. There, the story's over. We're done. But it's never done. And the ultimate in that kind of story, it's sort of borrowing from C.S. Lewis's ideas, um, is that the ultimate example is Jesus on the cross. He dies. He's put into a tomb.
Yeah.
You can't get more rock bottom than that. If the story was going to end, that would be the end of a story. A sad, awful, tragic, depressing ending. Here was this great, great person who did unbelievable things and then dies. Except that's not the end of the story, is it? The best part of the story comes then 3 days later.
Mhm.
um, and so we have to understand that too. We need to understand that's not just, that's the prototype for every story. That's what's so wonderful. That's the prototype for all stories. We're all in that situation. We're all, no matter how bleak and down and terrible and awful things look, how wretched they seem to be, um, there's always something coming up. What happens next? There's a next part of the story, and death cannot stop it. death cannot stop it. This is like the Princess Bride, death cannot stop true love. True love goes
Uh-huh.
on forever. It's the same thing. Death cannot stop story. Story continues on. It keeps going. It keeps going. And so we should, because we are walking, talking stories. We need to understand what stories are and how they work.
Mhm.
And so that's why I write. One of the reasons why I write, one of the reasons why I teach writing, is because I want people to understand that. I had a great professor in grad school who really understood this more than anybody else. He understood this like nobody else I knew. And when you had a personal problem, you go and talk to him, and he would say, okay, well, where are you? Are you in act one? Are you in act two? Maybe you're at the beginning of act two. It looks like you're about to hit a climax in your life here. He just related it to story, and you went, wow, if I just think about it in that way,
Mhm.
it makes things so much better.
It does.
It really makes your life like, oh wow, I get it now. I understand that. And
Mhm.
he not only understood it, he lived it. And I thought, wow, that is something to really aspire to, is to really kind of live that kind of life when you think that your life is just terrible and awful, and no good is coming of it. um, where are you in the story? Remember where you are in the story. That's a great
Mhm.
way of looking at it. Where am I in the story? Oh yeah, you know what? I think I'm just beginning. I just had my peripeteia. I just had my reversal of fortune here. Uh-oh. I was going along with my life. It was normal. And suddenly, wham, something happened and it spun me all around and I don't know where I'm going. That's the end of act one. This is only act one in the story. So now you got to turn around, and now you got more complications and confrontations and all stuff that are going to happen until you reach a climax. And you're going to go into the climax of act two, and then you're going to go into act three. So it's just a wonderful way, I think, of looking at life in general, if you look at it that way. And then you can see all of these elements everywhere in great stories. All the way, David, the story of David is just one thing after another that way.
Yeah.
Ups and downs and ups and downs, and character development and big thing, and false victories and false defeats, and all of those kinds of wonderful things. And his character develops all the way through it, which is really wonderful.
Mhm.
So I think that's just a really good way of looking at stuff. J.K. Rowling, when she was writing Harry Potter, she gave a commencement, I think, at Stanford University one year, and she talked about the history of that and how here she was in her life. Everything seemed to be going fairly good. She was married. She had a small child. Her husband supposedly in a loving marriage and the whole bit. And then her husband leaves her,
Mhm.
and her world falls apart. She has a peripeteia. She has a reversal of situation, and things kept going from bad to worse and bad to worse and bad to worse, and pretty soon she's on the dole. She's taken welfare and charity, and she said the only things I had left in the world were my child, my son, my infant son, and this story about a boy magician. That's the only things I had left in the world. I didn't even know where I was staying, so I would go to coffee shops, and I would sit and order a cup of coffee, the cheapest thing I could find, and then I would sit and write all day. She said I
Mhm.
was at rock bottom. And she said, you know what I found out? I found out that rock bottom is a pretty good foundation to build on.
Yeah.
You start building, building, building off of the solid rock of the rock bottom. And she said that was very encouraging. And I thought, you know what? She's absolutely right. That's a really good thing to notice about life. It's those kinds of things that writing provides you also. You get this clarity of thought very much when you're writing, because you're trying to convey it to other people. And if you can't understand it, how can you really convey it to others?
All right. So what helps you to write? For some people, I know it's music, or there's like a specific pen or some spot that they have to sit at, or
Yeah, I have had different kinds of things like that at different points in my life. So there were certain times when I really needed to stay in the same place and do the writing there. That's where it all happened at this location. So you develop your own little nest, basically, of things that that are around you that you really want. But then as with life, as with story, things change. That started to be no longer inspiring. It felt stifling. So you had to get out and go someplace else. And so for a long time, many years, I wrote at a favorite restaurant. I worked out a deal with the people who own the restaurant. I'd go in there and order breakfast, and they let me stay in an unused section of the restaurant that they weren't using until about dinner time, when they said, okay, you got to get out now because we're having customers who come in. But they let me use, they let me use their electricity. And I sat there and wrote most of the day in that restaurant. And it was kind of my office away from an office, my home office. I was pioneering the remote work thing long before COVID. I was on staff at Focus, and that's where I created Odyssey and worked there for about 6 years. And then Focus left me. I didn't leave them. They left me. They moved from California to Colorado, and I didn't make that move. I stayed in California, and I worked remotely. And from then on, I had a home office, and that stood me in good stead for the next many multiple years. Took a little break, but still worked out of my home. Came back to the program, still here working out of my home. So I've been doing that for a long time, more than 25 years now. I've been doing the home office thing, working out of my house. But the lovely thing about your home is that you find you have lots of different locations in your home that you can work. You don't necessarily stick in one place. As a matter of fact, I just saw a product that I'm going to get. It's a little roller desk, so you can roll everything to different parts of the house now, and I can roll over here and roll over there. And the nice thing for me also is that we just moved from California back to my hometown here in Arizona, to where I left, and so we've been away for about 40 years, most of my career. And now I'm back, and I have like this new house to kind of explore and work in different places and do different things, and beautiful scenery around me that I can go and be inspired by. I actually, I know a lot of people say that they like to sit in front of a window that has a great scene, a vista and whatnot, and it inspires them to write. I find that distracting, if you want to know the truth. I really want to stay focused. I want to be in the story. Yeah, I really want to be in the story, and I don't want the distractions of other things around me to take me out of the story. I mean, as a writer, you probably understand this too. When you're really into it, and it's a delicate thing. It can be easily destroyed, and so you're really thinking about what do I need to do here? How do I need to do it? And you've got these great things and right about the time I'm getting ready to type them, my wife comes in and says, could you go to the store for me? Could you go to the, could you walk the dogs, or there's something out here I need you to help me with? And I'm like, oh.
Or the phone rings.
Or the phone rings, or something else that distracts you completely. So you really want to guard that time, that, those moments, especially when you're really into it, it's in your head, you're in the world. That is a wonderful place to be. But you just got to find those places. They're I suppose I'm kind of superstitious like everybody else. There's certain rituals that I have, I have to have the cup of coffee, and I have to have, that sort of thing. But I've really tried to kind of break those things over the years. Currently, I don't really have that. I'm really just trying to, as you get older, it's more time of day than it is things around you. So I used to be a real night and late afternoon and evening person, and night person. I do everything then. And as I got older, I couldn't do that anymore. And then when I'm back to grad school, I was pulling all-nighters, and that was well into my 50s, which is hard to do. And so I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And then something happens to you when you get to be a certain age. You just start waking up really early in the morning, really early, like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I don't want to. It's just that I'm awake. Well, I better get up and go do something. So I do that. I'll work at those times. But I also find that, to be honest with you, most of my day I'll do some work, and then in the mornings, and then around midday or afternoon, it's like, okay, it's the law of diminishing returns. I'm not really getting the good stuff out of here. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a break, and I'll have a long lunch, and then I'll try to do some more work. And basically the work I'm doing in the afternoon is just editing what I did in the morning. It's not really creating new stuff. And then I'll go to dinner, and my wife and I usually just sit. It's just the two of us. So we sit in our really comfortable recliners, and I eat dinner, and within, 10 minutes after eating dinner, I'm asleep in the chair. And so she goes to bed, and I'm sleeping in the chair, and I wake up, and when I wake up, it's usually almost midnight. So I've slept from like 8 o'clock to midnight, and then I get up and I do a couple of hours worth of work. I do different things and stuff, and I do a couple of hours of work, and then I go to bed around 2, and then I wake up at around 5:30 or 4 or 5:30, somewhere around in there, and then I start everything over again. And I don't know if that's healthy. I have no idea, because I'm not controlling it. Something else is happening here. I don't know what it is. So
Interesting.
something for you to look forward to.
Yeah. So what has writing taught you?
Virtually everything. Writing has taught me, again, virtually everything. It's taught me how to use words properly. It's taught me the importance of language. It's taught me how precious and delicate and powerful language is, the gift of God that it is. I mean, being blessed with the divine property of speech is unbelievably important.
Yeah.
And how easily it can be misconstrued. The power of words. Interestingly enough, I mean, we could talk like this live, and if somebody were to transcribe what we're talking about and put it on paper without all of the inflections and all the laughter and all the stuff that we're doing and the joking back and forth, it would seem like a completely different conversation. It would have a completely different tone. So you really have to understand the power of words. For some reason, when something is written out on a piece of paper or on a screen, it carries more weight, far more weight and seriousness than it does if we're talking like this. And I just had to learn that lesson the hard way over and over again. But writing has taught me how to create worlds, and why that's important. That's also really, really important. And it's taught me how to interpret worlds that other people have created, which is even maybe even more important, whether those worlds are fictional or not. So it's taught me, for instance, biblical interpretation. I know what I mean when I'm writing. Can I convey that to others? Can I convey that to others? Well, the people who wrote scripture were divinely inspired, but they were also human. And so something was going on that they were compelled supernaturally to write out and explain, because they had to explain it to the group of believers who were following through thousands of years. Are we getting what they meant at all? Are we getting what they meant at all? Well, if you start writing and you start doing it on your end, trying to do that with other people, even on the short term, 5 years or 2 years or 3 years or 6 months, are you going to understand what I meant? You understand the difficulties of what they must have gone through, even though they were divinely inspired. Even though they were their partner muse, as it were, is the Holy Spirit, who is telling them basically how to do this and what to do. So that's really important for writers. I think it's important to know what you're doing, but also to listen and use what you're doing to interpret what other people are writing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So who are you inspired by in your writing?
I've been inspired by a lot of people over the years. Some of them have fallen from grace in the eyes of people. I was very inspired by Joss Whedon. He was very, very hero of mine, not personal hero, but creative hero of mine. I thought he was such a splendid storyteller, such a splendid crafter of stories. Back when he was doing Firefly, and when he was doing that whole
Firefly's awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. I was in grad school at that point, and there was a whole group of us who were really involved in that, and we didn't really know it. Firefly has sort of brought us all together. And we would start, somebody would say something, and somebody would say, oh yeah, did you watch that too? Oh, that's amazing. And so he was writing at some point, and I think it was when the movie came out, Serenity came out. We were talking about it, and I said, how is he not a Christian? I don't understand how Joss Whedon is not a Christian, because he explains Christian concepts so much better than Christians do. he just inculcates them in his writing, and it's so natural and it's so wonderful, and it's just, from everything from superficially, like in the Avengers movie when Thor comes in the first
Mhm.
movie and gets Loki out of the plane, and Captain America uh, is basically about to get ready to jump out of the plane, and Black Widow says, "You might want to sit this one out, Captain. These guys are basically gods."
Right.
And Captain America
That's
says,
not my
"There's only
guy.
one God. There's only one God, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that." And he just
Right.
jumps out of the plane. I mean, that's on the superficial level
Uh-huh.
of profundity, but still, it's the same thing. He just inculcates it. He just puts that into all of his stuff as a matter of course. It's great from that standpoint. And then then when Loki, right before that, when Loki was basically terrorizing all the people in Germany, making
Mhm.
them bow down, and Loki has that wonderful speech where he says, "This is not better. This is not better for you. This is your natural state. In the
Right.
end, you will always bow." And the old man stands up and says, "Not to men like you."
Mhm.
And then Loki says, "There are no men like me." And the man says, "There are always men like you." Ah, great stuff. That's so fantastic. And that's what Joss Whedon does really, really well. And all the way through Firefly, and all the way through Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and all of his early series, he was so good at that. Um, and then, of course, he has this fall from grace. So you have to, right now, I think a lot of us are trying to separate the work of the artist from the artists themselves. I mean, there's so many things that are happening in the industry to people. Some of their
Yeah.
really bad behavior is coming to light, and all of us are asking these questions right now. I think, of, do we then just does that nullify everything that they've done in their life because they're caught doing bad things, or can we actually still get some good out of their past work and say, you know what, despite the fact that he's kind of a reprobate and has done really bad and awful things, he did this as well. And
Right.
this is a really great thing. This is a really good thing that's worthwhile. Um, so I think that's a kind of a good way to look at it. One of my personal, I'm really inspired by him, is a guy named Doug Wilson. He's up in Idaho, and he's a pastor of a Reformed church, but he has a company called Canon Press and Canon Plus. They have an app, and I'm amazed at his output. I mean, he's older than I am, and he is doing 10 times the amount of work that I do. I just can't believe he just writes books like they're, going out of style, and then they're just boom, one right after the other. And he has wonderful ways of talking about books. He has a book called Wordsmithy that talks about how to write books, and another one called Productivity that shows how to organize yourself and get things done. And he's funny, and he's a good speaker, and has some really, what I really like about him is, though he's a pastor as a profession, his degree is in philosophy, as was mine. I have a couple of degrees in philosophy and a couple of degrees in the radio, TV, film, and those kinds of things as well. But so I get what he's doing a lot of
Mhm.
times. I think that's the other thing. Um, when you take philosophy, um, it's very much like when kids take karate classes when they're little, and the sensei tells them, "Don't do this on the family dog.
Mm.
Don't do this to your younger brother and younger sister. If I catch you, if I hear that you've been doing this to your younger, you're out of the class. You're out. I'm not going to do it anymore." Well, the same thing happens with philosophy professors. If you have a good philosophy professor, they will tell you, "Don't do this at home. Don't do this to your family. Don't do what we're doing in the class. Don't do to your family, because they'll hate you for it. They'll completely hate you for it." And they're absolutely right. You don't, the way we do philosophy is not the way you should do conversations at your house. And I learned that the hard way too. Um, so, um, I didn't believe it. And then, one day my whole family was telling me, "Will you just shut up? We don't want to do the philosophy. We just want to enjoy the film." Okay,
Mm.
okay, all right, all right, all right. So, but and Doug Wilson he approached everything from philosophy to his master's degrees in philosophy, and so he approaches scripture from a philosophical standpoint. And so, whereas a lot of people are like, I don't agree with that, get really up in arms with some of the stuff that he's saying,
Mhm.
I kind of click with it, because it works with me, because I understand what he's doing. I see how he's approaching all of this. So it's just he's one of the guys that I really like. I'm astounded by his output. It's just wonderful. As far as just public speaking is concerned, I'm hitting all the cliches here, but I really enjoy Jordan Peterson a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
He has been, he's had a remarkable, he's a remarkable communicator, I think. And one of the things that he has, one of the things that he is, I go, I'm not the only one. I always tell people when we do these kind of interviews, they'll say things to me like, okay, we're only going to do a half an hour. And I'm like, well, good luck. Good luck holding me to a half an hour. I mean, if you can, that's great. But um,
I
and
have no time
Peter,
limit.
Peterson was one of the people who said, I'm really gratified by the idea that, you know, I get a lot of young people at my lectures, and they come in on a Tuesday night, a school night on Tuesday night, and they're willing to sit and listen to me for 3 or 4 hours, just talk about things. And I'll go on podcasts with interviews, and you know, these people are the 3 and 4 hour conversations, and people will listen to them all and comment on them all and talk about things that we're talking about. And and he said, so this idea that we all have limited attention spans is really a myth. You know, it all just depends on how interesting the conversation it is.
Yeah.
The conversation is. So, I think he's one of the guys too. And I think he comes up with some very, very interesting and profound comments on things, the perspectives, the way he looks at stuff. I think are very interesting. So, I mean, those are 3 of the people. There have been multiple other people over the years that I've really admired and tried to model myself after, and tried to model some of my writing after, things like that. But they come and go. You know, sooner or later, you sort of develop your own voice and the way you work, and it's all still borrowing from all those other people, but by the same token, it's kind of uniquely you.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you ever go back and read your own work? I know there are some people that are like, okay, I always have to go back and read my own stuff, or I really like doing that. Some people who are like, no, once it's done, I put it away and it's never sees the light of day in my house again.
I have not really listened to any of the adventures and odysseys that I have written, and I've written, I'm approaching, I think, like 250 of them since they were done.
Wow.
In many cases. So to say that I haven't really listened to them, you listen to them a lot when you're working on them.
Right.
So everything, I have to reread the scripts. I have to make sure that everything is right on the scripts. And then directing wise, you're directing multiple takes on scenes and things like that. And then the production engineers take them, and they may have questions of you, and you're hearing it. And then you do a playback, and you hear the show there, and then make comments, and then you do a refined final playback. So you get immersed in that program in a very short amount of time for that program. And by the end of it, you're like, I don't ever want to hear this thing again. I mean, just get it out of there. And I've heard it multiple times. So I don't really listen to them. I haven't listened to them in a long time. A lot of the time, in fact, for most of them, the last time I heard them was during the last playback that we had. And so that's over the past 35 years. Now, occasionally, there have been times when we'll be on a trip, driving across country, driving to see relatives or whatnot, and we're flipping through the radio stations trying to find something. And suddenly I recognize, just from a little flash, the Odyssey theme or something that sounds really familiar. And so, hey, go back. And lo and behold, it's an Odyssey, which is interesting to me because Odyssey doesn't sound like anything else on the radio. You can instantly pick it out just by hearing a couple of seconds of it. You go, oh, wait a minute. I think that was Odyssey. And so I'll go back and then be pleasantly surprised, because the memory was that episode didn't work at all. It didn't work at all. And I'll hear the episode again and go, oh, that actually was pretty good. I forgot about that. So that's nice as far as that is concerned. As far as writing is concerned, you're kind of the same thing in terms of books. You're kind of doing the same thing. You got to go over them and over them and over them and over them, and you write and then write and then rewrite and then rewrite and then rewrite in order to refine it. And so I purposefully stay away from books until a good amount of time has passed, because I want to be, I want to have forgotten
Right.
all of everything that I had to pour in, all of myself that I had to pour into this thing, which made me just so exhausted. I want to kind of forget all of that and then just approach it by, is this a fresh story that works on its own accord? So from that perspective, I stay away from it for a while. And then I get curious and go, oh, let me read this again. And then I'll reread it. They go, okay, that worked. I wasn't sure it was going to work, but that worked. Or, oh no, I wish I could rewrite that part. You know, that kind of thing. There's always improvements. You know,
Of
you can
course.
always make improvements, and you can tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak till the cows come home, if you have a mind to do that. But that sooner or later, you just kind of have to release it, let it go. It's done.
All right. What is your advice for writers?
I'm really bad at this. I have to tell you, I'm really, really bad at it. Somebody just asked me that recently, and as a matter of fact, it was another writing teacher, and she sent me a message online and said, I'm teaching a course for writing, and I asked my students to tell me about their greatest fears. As you know, what fears do they have?
Yeah.
And a lot of them came back and said that they had a fear of failure was the first one, and then fear of not being able to see the project through. And she said, do you have any words of encouragement that you can give them, any advice and words of encouragement? And I'm like, I'm no, I'm really bad at this. But I'll take a stab at it. Okay. So, and I'll explain why. I said, look, I told her, and this is kind of the way I think, but this is the way I think about it. The most any of us can tell anybody as far as this business is concerned, as far as just the craft of writing is concerned, is keep writing. I mean, but it all boils down to, you know, that's as encouraging as I can get. Just keep writing. I mean, honestly, I don't have anything else to tell you beyond that. If you can't stick to it and keep writing, then you should choose something else to do. There's plenty of other things out there to do, and you should just do that, because this is hard enough as it is. It's really hard. This is really hard. And if you have a fear of failure, maybe this profession isn't for you. Maybe this isn't what you should be doing. If you feel like you have a fear of not being able to see the project through, then don't see it through, and don't, you know, use your time more productively doing other things. And a lot of people say, man, you know, I talked to another guy just recently, and he was, can you help me out with this? And so I was asking him a bunch of questions, and as I was going on, he goes, man, you really don't have the gift of encouragement, do you? And I said, actually, I think I'm more encouraging than most people, and I'll explain why. I'm trying to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell you the hard, cold, honest truth about what writing is, what the writing life is, how the writing life works. Routinely, when I teach my courses, I'll start out in a classroom situation with kids who were just there taking the course. I'll start out with 25, 30 students, something like that, on the first day, the first week. And after I've explained the syllabus and what the writing life is like and what is going to be demanded of them in this course, I'll have maybe 10 left in the second class, second week. And by the time the midterm rolls around, I have 6. And by the time by the time the semester ends, I have 4. That's how many I have. 4 who were actually able to stick it out. And I said, well, you know what? My job basically is to tell you how hard this is right from the get-go, so that you're not going to be spinning your wheels. If you think you have some doubts about this, or this might have been fun, or this is going to be an easy course, or I'm here to disabuse you of that right now. And that's as encouraging as I can be. Because I'm telling you what the life is, what's demanded of you, how you need to approach the life, and what happens in it. And I'm giving you an out. You know, if that's not attractive to you, go do something else. Don't spin your wheels here, and there are plenty of wonderful other things to do. in this business. Even just in this business, you can do lots of other things.
Right.
Writing is not for everyone. I can tell.
Mhm.
I know that there are a lot of people that are going to come along and go, no, that's not the case. That's not anybody can write. Anybody can write. Anybody can write school papers.
Mhm.
But if you're going to do this as a profession, if you're really looking to go beyond that and do this as a profession, here's what it takes to
Yeah.
do it. And even if you follow all of what I'm telling you, you still may never make a sale.
Right.
You still may do nothing in this business.
Mhm.
Nothing. That's the gamble that you take. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's as encouraging as I can be. Sorry, that's the best advice I can give everybody.
Yeah, writing's it's not always easy.
It's a demanding taskmaster. It,
Yeah.
it really is. It's very, very, it's not, to do it right is not easy at all.
Mhm.
And you have to love it.
Yeah.
And by love it, I mean, I know a lot of people, and even professionals, a lot of very successful people who are writers who've made a living out of writing. And when you ask them, they say, I love having written.
Mm.
I love having written. I don't like writing, but I love having written. In other words, I like the finished product,
Yeah.
but I don't really like the process at all. And I'm like, how can you be a writer and not love the process?
Mhm.
I had a faculty meeting of writers of the writing faculty at Azusa Pacific one year, and most of them were saying the same thing. And I stopped everybody and I said, "You got to be kidding me! You guys are teaching writing, and none of you like the writing process?
Hmm.
How can you be teachers of it if you don't like the process?" I suppose you can teach the foundational elements of it, but if you're going to tell people what the life is like, you have to love this process. I love every bit, even when it's the most frustrating, awful, terrible thing, and I want to pull my brains out of my head because I can't make it work. It's still, I love the process. I love every bit of it. And when I finish one, I want to start another one
Mhm.
immediately. I don't want to just go, okay, phew, I like having written that. Now I don't want to deal with it anymore. No, I want to start another one right away, right away.
Okay.
So I love the process, and you have to develop a love for it, because if not, it'll drive you absolutely crazy. It really will.
Mhm.
Andrew Clavin, I don't know if you know who Andrew Clavin is. He's a writer. He writes novels
Okay.
and screenplays, and he's one of I don't know if you are familiar with Ben Shapiro and his whole Daily Wire group. He's one of those guys,
Okay.
older guy. He's about my age, and but he talks about his whole life. He wrote a book called The Great Good Thing: How a Jew Came to Christianity. So it's basically how he converted to Christianity. And one of the things he talks about in there is his writing life. And he has this great quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but the gist of the quote is that writers, every other profession gets to leave their work where they're working and go home and do other things. Almost every other profession do that. Writers never get to leave their work,
Mhm.
ever.
That's true. Yeah.
It's always in your head. So a part of your brain is always working on a story. A part of your brain is always working on a complex situation in your head that you've got to work the story problem out. And so you're never fully, completely there anywhere. Okay. Ray Bradbury said this too. Ray Bradbury was a great science fiction writer
Oh yeah.
he used to do lectures at colleges in California all the time, around the Los Angeles area. They filmed one of them when he was still really young, but he was telling everybody, just say goodbye to holidays. You won't have a holiday anymore. Seriously, you'll be there. You'll be there. Celebrate Christmas. You'll celebrate Thanksgiving. You'll be at a birthday party. You'll be there physically, but not all of you is there. Part of
Yeah.
you is
You're
still
right.
back at your desk working out a story beat. And
Uh-huh.
people will ask you a question, and you'll go, "What? I'm sorry." And and it's because you're in your mind working on a
Mhm.
story beat somewhere. And he says, so
Well,
just if that's it, that's the life. That's what you're going to do. You're going to be working on a story somewhere.
right.
And Andrew Clavin went on to say the same thing. And he said, now you have to understand what this entails. We never get to just put our work away and go home and leave it there, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow morning. It's still in the back of our brain. He said every other group of people, writers are the only group that um, you if you're not a writer, if you're in any other profession, you can exercise your demons. Okay, you can get rid of the bad things about your parent, all the rotten things that you've ever done in your life, and all the bad personality traits and bad personality habits.
Mhm.
You can have this sort of cathartic experience, whether it's conversion to Christianity or other things, and then just get rid of them. Okay, you
Yeah.
can those that was in the past, not there now.
Mhm.
Writers have to dig those things back up
Yeah.
because we have to write authentic characters. We have to write things that are true. And so we never get to fully exercise our demons. We never get to fully, in fact, we have to dredge them up and actually make them happen again. And it's just a terrible, awful thing for us to do, but we have to do it because we have to write convincing villains. We have to write convincing bad guys. We have to write convincing situations. And we have to do that based on what we know of life and truth and whatnot. And he said there are harder jobs in the world. There are many harder jobs. Being a soldier is harder. Being a homemaker, being a mother and a homemaker is far more difficult than writing. But writing can drive you crazy. It can drive you absolutely bananas. And he said it's just the way it is. You have to accept it, and that's the way it works. And he's right. He's absolutely right, 100%. So if you want to be a writer, just be prepared to go a little bit nutty in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. If you're good, I'm good.
All right.
Is there anything else you wanted to ask me?
I'm out of questions. You hit the whole list.
Great. Fantastic. That's wonderful. I'm glad. So how you publish this, or is it online, or how does this work? Are you going to take this video and use it, or what?
So it works in multiple different ways at the same time.
Okay.
So we get to we're going to take the video. Video is going to go on YouTube, assuming you're comfortable with that.
Sure.
We're going to take the
I wish
audio.
I was better lit.
What's that?
I wish I was better lit.
I've had worse. Don't worry. So we're going to take the audio, and that's going to go into our podcast.
Okay.
For our summer issue.
Okay.
And all of this is going to be coming out with our summer issue, which will be the first Saturday of August.
Okay. Good.
So the video is going to go on YouTube. The audio is going to go into the podcast for the issue. And then I'm going to actually type it out, and a chunk of it, but not the whole thing, because we can never fit the whole thing. But parts of it are going to go into the visual magazine, which would be the usual kind of magazine.
Oh, wow. Great.
Which is also online.
Okay.
But what we do with that is not only do we publish it online, this year we're starting a new thing where we're taking the 4 issues that we do each year, and we're putting them together and publishing them as a book.
Oh, okay.
So at some point it'll be part of a book as well.
Excellent.
You'll be all over the place.
I'd love to get if you do the book, I'd love to get a copy of it. That would be great.
Of course.
If I could get a copy.
Yeah. It'll definitely take us a while to get there, because this is a new thing this year.
Sure.
So this year we're hoping to publish the book from 2020.
Okay.
Those 4 issues. And maybe we'll get to 2021, but I kind of doubt it.
Yeah.
We shall see. So I don't expect to get to the 2022 book until well into 2023.
That's the lovely thing about it, though. That kind of thing is always wonderful for me, because it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I did that thing back in whenever it was. Oh, how pleasant. I have words that I spoke somewhere and somebody copied them down. That's really nice. But whenever you get a chance, that would be great. If you're able to publish them, I'd love to get a copy of it.
Okay, you email me your address to send it to, and when we get there, I will get it to you.
Fantastic. I'll do it. So how did you come up with the name of this website, organization, group, publishing company?
Sophia is from the 2 Greek words logos, which is word, and Sophia, which is wisdom. And when we were putting this whole thing together in the background, we had our team just kind of spitballing things, and throwing out ideas, and then we voted on them.
Ah,
And the one that won ended up being Logos Sophia.
excellent. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So the wisdom of words, basically.
Or words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom, the wisdom of words. Philosophy is philo, Sophia, which
Right.
is
The
the
love
love
of
of wisdom, which is why it's why I thought it was wonderful to do philosophy.
wisdom.
I love wisdom. Solomon, yay, go Solomon.
Woohoo. Yes.
So yeah, okay, and I figured it was something like that. I also have I'm working on my own series of a little YouTube series that I'm doing that I started. I started it when COVID first hit and everybody was trapped inside of their houses,
Mhm.
and then I got busy and sidetracked doing other things, so I haven't picked it up yet. I've got about 6 or 7 episodes done, and it's a little video thing that I call logophilia. So
Okay.
it's basically love of words,
Mhm.
and it just takes strange and wonderful and weird words, and then I explain them, and then
That sounds so
intercut little
fun.
scenes and intercut little bits in them and show how they're used. And I try to keep everything to around a minute, maybe a minute and a half. I don't want anything more than that, really.
Mhm.
And then make them funny and make them weird. And then the whole idea is, if you want to be a writer, you got to love words. Here are the way some
Yeah.
words work. So I'll send you a couple of those too, and you can take a look at them, and we can cross promote and do all that sort of stuff if
That's
you've a
cool.
mind to do that.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It actually, you saying that reminds me of a book I read not long ago. When my brother was Christmas shopping for me, he found this book and he's like, okay, she needs this book. And I believe it's right behind me, actually. It's a great thing about having a bookshelf behind me. It's called The Professor and the Madman.
Ah,
And the subtitle is A Tale of Murder, Insanity, and the Making of the Oxford English Dictionary.
yes.
And this is,
Actually, wasn't this a movie? Didn't they
I
turn this into a
haven't heard of
movie?
it being a movie, but I'm not huge on movies, so I don't know.
I
But
thought that Mel Gibson did a role in this. He was one of the madmen or he was either the professor or the man who was who was trying to create the Oxford English Dictionary. Yeah, that was part of it. I
I'll have to
thought
look
maybe
that up.
it got absolutely no press whatsoever, but I did see a clip of it somewhere, and I thought that looked really, really interesting. I don't know where it came out, but that's interesting. So what's the gist of the tale? How does it work?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's very well written, and the author goes all out in the words that he uses, as he should when he's writing about the
Of
dictionary.
course, of course.
And many of the chapters start with like a definition from the original Oxford English Dictionary of like,
Wow.
okay, here's some idea that's going to be used throughout this chapter. And it's about these two guys. So there's Professor James Murray, who
Mhm.
was the professor, and he was struggling with this ginormous task of putting together the Oxford English Dictionary. And he
Wow.
was, I believe, the second or third person to be kind of in charge of this.
Mhm.
And he had enlisted whoever read the article, or not the articles, the advertisements he had sent out. He had
Mhm.
sent out advertisements all across the board being like, hey, if you're a reader, read and give us any words that you find.
Oh, wow.
And one of the most prolific correspondents he ended up with was this guy named Dr. W.C. Minor,
Okay.
and he was the madman. He was in an insane asylum, a very nice insane asylum, but
Wow.
still an insane asylum that he was locked up in for killing a man. And it goes into Murray's life, it goes into Minor's life and the delusions he has, and it was just so well written.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. I'm
It
gonna have to
is.
get that. The Professor and
Yeah.
the Madman. That's what it's called, huh?
Right, The Professor and the Madman, and the author is Simon Winchester.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna
it's
look it up.
a really fun book.
Awesome. That
Yeah.
sounds great. I'm gonna write it
So
down right now.
I definitely love my words.
Good. Good. I love antiquated words as well. I love bringing back antiquated words and trying to put them casually into, dropping them casually into the things that I write. You want to make them sound as natural as possible, you know, and then Latin terminology that you can just sprinkle in there. William F. Buckley was just great at sprinkling in Latin commentary and all of this stuff. He was so wonderful at that. You go, oh man, he sounds educated.
Yeah.
So it's the that's the joy to me. That's the kind of the joyous thing about it. I also was always fascinated, I have to tell you, by
Mhm.
in both in reading books and in reading and watching films and television shows, well-written television shows. When something moved me in a book or moved me in a film or moved me even in audio drama, I listened to audio drama that really moved me. After I recovered from whatever emotion it was,
Yeah.
I would always want to go back and listen to it, or and especially in books, because book was, as I was growing up, books were the only thing that I could actually rewind and play again immediately.
Right.
You know, now you can do it with everything, um, but I would always want to do that and say, how did they do that? How did this
Yeah.
writer do that? I just read some squiggly black lines on a white piece of parchment, wood pulp, basically, and
Right.
I am crying. I'm moved to tears because of this. How did that guy do that?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Or laughter is even harder,
Hmm.
especially in a book. You've got no
Yeah.
facial expressions. You've got no wackiness that you can do to add to it. You've got no music background to go, no laugh track or whatever. I'm reading a book and I'm reading a book and I just read something that was so funny that it had me falling off of my chair laughing. Okay, once
Yeah.
I've recovered, I got to go back and read it and say, how in the world did he do that? How did she get me to laugh that hard at
Mhm.
this? At words on a paper, on a piece of paper. I was I have been absolutely fascinated by that ever since, you know, I can remember. Um, Live stage shows. If I could just, could you just do that one more time?
Right.
That's the
Rewind.
hardest. That's the hardest thing to do, because you know you can't just really repeat what you just did. It could have been
Right.
a really subtle thing that just had everybody roaring in laughter, and then the next night you try to do the same thing and you can't repeat it at all. That's a magical moment that's lost forever. You had to
Mhm.
be there at that time doing that thing and watching them do that thing. But I always
Yeah.
was like, man, that is just
You
how do
also
you
have to
do
have the
that?
right audience.
Yeah, yeah, you do. All that's the, but you know, consistently. So for instance, I'm sure you've heard of Abbott and Costello's Who's on First routine.
Of
Who's on
course.
first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. It doesn't matter who's doing that and at what pace, that routine gets a laugh every single time.
Yeah.
So whoever constructed that, and nobody really knows who actually wrote that. That's
Oh, what
been
a
one of those
shame.
things that was done over the years in vaudeville, and everybody stole it, and burlesque houses, and everybody stole it, and finally it's attributed to Abbott and Costello. It's attributed to them because they perfected that routine.
Hmm.
But just the way that thing works, the speed with which it works, speed is, you know, timing is very
Right.
important, but just the words themselves. You can
Hmm.
print that out in a magazine and just read it, and you'd still get laughs out of it, just because you're thinking, well, look at the wordplay here, this is so interesting,
Right.
so interesting how that works. And I man, that to me is what everybody, again, if you're going to be a writer, you should be able to know how to deconstruct things and use them in your own writing. Use that format, use that formula, use that whatever it is that you're seeing there. You
Mhm.
should be able to go, I should be able to do that here.
Yeah.
I should be able to do that kind of thing here, to turn everything on a dime, to give me the unexpected ending, to give me a revelation that nobody saw coming. Whoa, oh, that's that kind of thing. Or to elicit laughter, to elicit tears, to elicit anger. You get
Hmm.
people who are mad at your characters. You get people. This is what I'm doing on Odyssey all the time, and people don't really even realize it. They're just responding to their own, you know, oh goodness gracious, I hate that character, I hate this, I'm thinking I'm not even going to listen to the program anymore because that character is on the program.
Hmm.
I'm thinking, do you understand what we've done here? I think you're
Yeah.
kind of missing the bigger picture here. You're so into what's happening that we're holding a mirror up to yourself, basically, is what we're trying to do through this character. There's obviously something that this character has touched in you, and maybe it's something that you need to think about in terms of your own personality. And that's that. When you can do that, that's just like, yes,
Hmm.
thank
Right
you. That's
now,
the magic.
right now, I'm reading Crime and Punishment, and I've never gotten to read it before, and I don't want to do much more than smack the character upside the head.
I know. I know. I have it right here. I have it right on my, I'm looking right there. I have it right on my bookshelf. I'm doing the same thing. And I'm like, why are you, what? Why? Stop.
Yes.
What? I know exactly how you feel. Exactly how you feel. It's amazing when that
But
can happen, though, isn't it? It's
it's
amazing.
truly magical that
Yeah,
these little squiggles on a piece of what used to be wood can elicit
exactly.
such a response.
Yeah, yeah. And other things about that is so amazing. Um, Time travel, of course, exists. It's called books.
Yeah.
You know, I have over here Plato's Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I could go back in time thousands of years and find out what he was thinking and what he was saying,
Right?
what those people were saying. And who says mind reading doesn't work? That's exactly what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
You're reading somebody's mind. It just happens to be in this form.
exactly.
Oh my goodness, of course it works, of course. See,
Mhm.
this is a big thing. I wrote this actually in the last book of the Young Wit books. I'm really trying to get this across because it's such an important part of character and story. um, just because we know how something works doesn't make it less magical.
Yeah,
Just because we
absolutely.
know the science behind it doesn't make it less magical. Science, that's the detriment of science to me. The detriment of science is
Yeah.
with it comes cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
I know how that works. I just flew back. I've been gone for a week and a half, right? Different places, Seattle first, then I went all over the place to try to get down to Burbank to do the recording, and now I'm back home.
Mm-hmm.
And I get on a plane. We get on a plane and we routinely fly thousands of miles every day, all the time. People do this every day, right? And we
Right.
forget that we're sitting in a metal tube that's flying through the air
At however
at
many
high
crazy
speed, and
miles
there
an
are
hour.
hundreds of us in here doing the same thing. That is a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. It's magic. I don't care
Terrifying
how you
miracle.
want to. Yes, yes. Because at one point in one of the flights, the pilot got up and you hear the plane going, and you're thinking, okay, we're rising, we're rising. And all of a sudden it went, and that sound of the engines went way down, and all of a sudden we kind of leveled off, and I thought, okay, this plane is plummeting to the ground. This is where the magic ends. We are going to all die in a fireball. And then it went back up again, and I'm like, that is just the magic, the miracle of it.
Hmm.
And we are so cynical about it. Oh well, science figures out how to do it. They figured out the rocket, the thrust of this or that. Do you think that makes it any less magical? Did you forget we're flying through the air?
Right.
That's incredible.
Hmm.
We routinely travel distances, especially if you live in Los Angeles or a major metropolitan area. We routinely travel distances every day that took our ancestors weeks to travel.
Yeah.
And we do that every day. In
Right.
Los Angeles, you go from the suburbs to downtown, you're going, the average commute, 50 miles.
Yeah.
50 miles you're
Hmm.
going in an hour.
Right. It's really crazy to
That
think
took
about
a
it.
week to do 100 years ago, 150 years ago. That was
Right.
impossible. If you told those people back then, one day there will be a contraption that you can get into with all of your gear and everything and your entire family, and you'll be able to do what we're doing here. The distance that we're traveling is taking us 3 or 4 days to go. You'll do it in an hour. They'd go, you're
Right.
crazy. You're absolutely crazy.
There's a map that somebody smart put together, and it takes the journey of Frodo and of Bilbo from Tolkien's works,
Yeah.
and it layers it over the United States. And
Ah,
I feel like, now I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it has Frodo going from like Missouri to down to the tip of Florida, and Bilbo would similarly go from Missouri I don't remember, somewhere east. Um, and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
how long did it take them on that journey? Which I'm just going to trust that Tolkien's realistic because it's stinking Tolkien.
Right.
And how long did it take them? It took them so many months, and
But
you
I
can
think I
hop
think
on an airplane
somewhere,
and get there in 3 hours
I don't remember
or
where, but I
less.
think somewhere it said, maybe this is in the movie, I don't know if this is in the books,
Mhm.
but it was like a year. It was like a year to the day. All of this stuff happened in 1 year.
Well, there and
So they
back
went
again,
every,
it
yeah,
took them a whole year. Yeah,
yeah. So
for Frodo. Yeah,
yeah. So I'm just that's, but yeah, you're right. They go all over the place. They go everywhere. They're,
yeah.
I did
It's
a series. I produced a series called that I created, produced. This is one of those self-done things that I was like, I just wanted my series. I don't want anybody else's input
yeah.
into it. It's just my series. It's called Iliad House, and
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Iliad House.
Okay.
Okay, so Adventures in Odyssey, Iliad. I like Greek poems. What,
Uh-huh.
sue me. At any rate, um, in this particular series has a time machine in it.
Okay.
And one of the things that I have in one of the episodes was modern people, because we have these conveniences, we don't have any sense of how how um, how long it takes to get from one place to another in reality.
Right.
Because we can hop in a car and go 5 miles in a couple of minutes, we forget how long a mile is.
Yeah.
Until our car breaks down and we have to walk a mile, we forget
Right.
how long a mile is. It's just
Hmm.
miles are nothing. The distances are shortened, and miles are nothing. Time is not what it was. And so I have characters, who go back in time, and they have to actually walk a couple of miles in order to get to from the train where the train is in order to get to the center of town. And
Yeah.
they're remarking on, wow, why does it take so long to do everything? How did anybody get anything done in the past? And you're like,
Right.
right. It takes a long time to
Hmm.
actually do these things if you're doing them on foot.
Yeah.
Whereas, that's why leaps forward in our progress happens with the steam engine. The first combustible steam engine that allows you to take long
Yes.
journeys in a couple of hours.
Hmm.
Um, that's those remarkable leaps forward in technology. Um, just mastering horses. You know,
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
not running anymore. Now I'm getting on the back of an animal that can run farther and faster than I can. Oh,
Hmm.
wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay. It
Yeah.
conquers distance, it makes distances shorter. And when you stop and think about something like that, for instance, in the Old West, not to
Hmm.
be politically incorrect, but when you stop to think about the lone cowboy out and a band of Indians are chasing him,
Hmm.
and how much he's relying on that horse.
Oh yeah.
If that horse stumbles at all, if that horse just decides, you know what, I'm not going to do this today, well, then you're dead. That's it. You're gone. I used to think a lot about that during watching Westerns. Man,
Hmm.
he's really, as long as that horse keeps running and that horse stays alive and doesn't stumble, he might make it out of there. But man, you're putting your life in your horse's hands.
Yeah. One of my friends recently suggested that some of us go on a 12-mile hike. And
Oh
it's like,
my.
oh,
You know how long 12 miles is? 12 miles? Are you
yeah.
are you crazy? Yeah,
Yeah.
I
He,
know.
he gave a rough time estimate. And I was like, okay, like maybe I could do that, but not recently. I hurt my foot, so I couldn't do it. I was like, no,
Yeah.
I'm out. But it's like, would I be able to do that on a regular, like if my foot wasn't hurting?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
last year, similarly, some of us went on a 10-mile bike ride. And I believe it was 10 miles out and then 10 miles back. And oh,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about that. Now imagine if you had to do that every day. So
yeah.
imagine that you were somebody who owns a farm,
Hmm.
and basically you're walking the equivalents, you may be going back and forth in the same field, but you're behind a plow, and you're
Hmm.
walking the equivalents of 5, 6, 7, 10 miles a day, just plowing up your field, and your foot gets hurt.
Yeah.
Now your lifeline is gone. You
Right.
got to get that field plowed. There's no way around it. You got to get that thing done. Oh, now what do you do? Now what do you do? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Now it's yeah, this is all really amazing stuff. We forget. I mean, modern conveniences, we totally forget all of this stuff.
Right.
It's so much fun to kind of get people to remember,
Yeah.
show them the reality of the situation.
Hmm.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
And thank you so much for being part of this today.
Of course, of course. I love doing this sort of thing. I love talking. Um, like I said, after we finished the recording sessions the other night, 2 nights ago,
Hmm.
Katie Lee says, "Oh, come on, let's do it." And we went to dinner. We had a big, huge dinner with the whole Odyssey crew, and then we went back to the hotel room and we set everything up, and we're going to do stuff. And she said, I'm really tired. I think we're only we're only going to do like 20 minutes and maybe a half an hour. Let's just do that.
Uh-huh.
2.5 hours later, 2.5 hours later, we yak and yak and yak and yak and yak and talk and
Uh-huh.
talk and talk. That's what I do. I just talk a lot.
That is okay. I'm kind of like talking myself.
Good.
I know you've been in some contact with Ian Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
who's my assistant editor, and he really wanted to be here, but unfortunately, his computer and Zoom just do not get along.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's too bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's okay. I mean, we can do this again in the future anytime you want. Just let me know when you'd like to do it. And we'll come up with a whole new round of questions and discussions and talks, and we'll do it again.
that sounds like fun.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much again.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Anytime.
Have a good
Bless you.
one.
Blessings on you.
Thank you. And you.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye.